Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the UNC Children's Hospital podcast, coming to you from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. UNC Children's is a major referral center for children with complex conditions and consistently recognized by U.S. News and World Report as one of America's best children's hospitals. Our focus today for the UNC Children's podcast is food allergies in children. During the holidays, especially Thanksgiving through New Year's, there is much focus on food, probably more so than throughout the rest of the entire year. And today we've invited Dr. Edwin Kim to talk with us about food allergies in children and how to navigate the holiday season. Dr. Edwin Kim, is Chief Division of Pediatric Allergy and Immunology and Director of the UNC Food Allergy Initiative, as well as an Associate Professor of Pediatric Allergy and Immunology with the UNC School of Medicine. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Kim.
Happy to be here, Phil.
So, starting out just kind of quickly, a recent story in Vox said peanuts, shellfish, soy, wheat, tree nuts, dairy, eggs. For millions of Americans, those ingredients are a recipe for an upset stomach, hives, swelling, or even a trip to the emergency room, all because of allergies to food. So let's just begin kind of broadly and talk about allergies in general. Just what is an allergy?
Yeah, that's, again, exactly as you pointed out, those are the most common foods to cause allergies. And I think the way I would start is that we know all kinds of things can happen when you eat food. Some of them are going to be allergy, but others are not. And so how do we separate those two things out? When I'm using the word allergy, really what I'm talking about is going to be reactions that happen after eating a food that happen really quickly. So usually within, say, 10, 15 minutes of eating, and can ultimately lead to a severe disease, a severe reaction called anaphylaxis that could even potentially be life-threatening.
Right. Now, typically when our bodies react to things, it's usually pretty straightforward and easy to understand the reaction. You know, the body is trying to fight an infection or rid itself of some type of contagion. If that's the case, so why does it seem that our bodies are attacking us when we come into contact with foods or other things that we're allergic to?
Yeah, Phil, I love that question. And if you get that answer, please let me know, because again, that's really the heart of all allergy, and actually also autoimmune disease. So exactly as you said, the immune system is supposed to be perfect. And, there's like one antibody for every different kind of bug that's out there to protect our bodies. But for whatever reason, in some patients, what happens is those same antibodies that are supposed to protect us actually react to things that they shouldn't. In the case of autoimmunity, these antibodies are attacking your own body. In the case of allergy, what happens is those antibodies somehow see these things like food or pollen that should be perfectly safe, but somehow sees them as bad and then has a reaction that can sometimes be pretty nasty to the person.
Now, if we focus in on food allergies, how dangerous can food allergies be for children?
Yeah, so like the worst case scenario, unfortunately, is there are reports of people who have had a food allergic reaction that ultimately led to them passing away. And so we know that it's a very, very rare occurrence. But I think the problem that we have as a field right now is we don't have great tests that can predict who that person will be. If we had some way that we could do a blood test, a skin test, whatever it might be able to say, okay, little Joey, in front of you, you are the one that if you got into something by accident, something really terrible could happen. But unfortunately, our tests are not good enough to be able to tell us that. So we're sort of left in this really tricky place where we have to tell everyone, look, the chances are really small, but it could be you. So you need to be ready for anything.
Right. Now, how do we spot food allergies in children, and how young do food allergies tend to present themselves?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought this up, because this is something that I do think is important to get the word out. So first of all, food allergies, most of the food allergies that we think about, so again, your milk allergy, peanut or eggs, most of those will show up very early in childhood. So this is going to be probably in that first few months of life. For peanut, maybe it's a little bit older than that. Now, some of the other foods, like for example, there's a lot of people out there that are allergic to seafood, whether it's fish or shellfish. And some people are even, especially in our area in North Carolina, are allergic to meat. Those seem to be ones that show up a little bit later, so probably more in adults. But the milk, egg, wheat, soy, peanuts, and tree nuts, some of the most common ones, these are all ones that show up very early in life. And really, usually the way that we find this is going to be actually by the patients telling us, about something that has happened to them. So maybe that, again, the child was given peanut butter for the very first time, and then within a few minutes, the parents notice, oh my goodness, there's redness all around the kid's mouth. And then perhaps a little bit after a few more minutes, they may have vomited, they may actually start wheezing or coughing. They may even start to look pale or like they actually have no energy or getting sleepy, showing possible sort of a cardiac response as well. And so the classic symptoms would be stuff on your skin. So maybe it's going to be hives or welts, or maybe it's just a lot of redness or itch. There could be breathing symptoms that kind of look like asthma. So it could be coughing and wheezing. And then I mentioned some of the stomach things. It could be really, really crampy, buckled over stomach ache, abdominal pain. It could be vomiting, it could be diarrhea. And then they could have some of those cardiac problems where they may have low blood pressure, and what that looks like on the outside might be someone that looks really pale, sleepy, no energy, or even fainting and passing out. So it usually starts with sort of the first exposure. That person eats the food and then has some combination of those symptoms I just mentioned. Then they come to us, and then what we can do is, okay, the story sounds really good for allergy, and then that's where our testing comes into play. So we have what we call skin testing or scratch testing, which is a way that we can actually take the different foods that we're worried about, just scratch the very surface of the skin and see if there's a reaction, or we can get a blood test. And both of those things, what they try to show is that part of the immune system that causes allergies? Is it there to sort of back up the story that we've heard of, that patient experience?
If a child is allergic to some type of food, is it likely they will grow out of that allergy or no?
Yeah, so that seems to be food specific, and it's something that like our field of food allergy is super curious about. So we know that milk and egg, first of all, are two of the most common food allergies, but if there is any good news, we know that about 80% of folks who have milk and egg allergy will outgrow it. On the other hand, unfortunately, peanut is also one of the super common ones, and there it's the opposite. So it's about 80% of people will not outgrow it. Or put another way, 80% of them will have this probably lifelong. And so why do the foods sort of behave differently? These are some of the aspects that we definitely are trying to figure out in our research so that we can help try to make more people actually outgrow these foods.
Right. Now, borrowing again from the Vox article on this, the U.S. Department of Agriculture says that about 2% of adults and 4 to 8% of children suffer from food allergies. But some think it could be as high as 10% across the board, meaning 33 million people just in the U.S. have some type of food allergy. Does that sound right to you?
Every time I hear those numbers, I'm always thinking like, this can't be real. This can't be real. But it is, and I think the way being a pediatrician, the way that I think it feels most real for me is when I think about it, especially with the kids. Like when I was younger, peanut-free tables, that didn't exist. I don't know that I even knew anyone who was allergic to peanut. But these days, every school out there probably has a peanut-free table or something like that. If you ever go to a school nurse's office, the number of EpiPens that you see in that one nurse's office is just, off the charts. Could be, tens to hundreds of EpiPens that are in there. The estimate is actually 2 kids in every classroom in the U.S. has a food allergy. And when you think of it that way, oh my goodness, it's just an incredible sort of growth in food allergy. And again, why in the world is this happening is that, I guess, $1 billion question that's out there.
Yeah, and that was actually led to my next question, and please correct me if I'm off track. When I was little, I don't recall very many friends or schoolmates with food allergies, with the exception of one who was allergic to shellfish. Now, I know that your children suffers from some food allergies. As a researcher and clinician in this area, how do you deal with those allergies as a parent?
Yeah, it is ironic in that way. So I was already studying food allergy before I had kids, and And now, as it turns out, two of my three kids have food allergy. One of them to peanut and another one to pistachio and cashew. Unfortunately, both of them have experienced anaphylaxis, and both of them were treated with their epinephrine. I will say both of them recovered instantaneously from their epinephrine, just like they're supposed to. And but again, to live it is very much not the same as to again to hear about it or to treat it or to teach it. I mean, it's incredible. And I will say that it's the very basics of it. So if you have an allergic reaction and how do you treat it? Okay, that's something I can learn in a textbook. But to actually live it, so go to restaurants, go to school, how do you avoid it? Where do you buy foods? These are really, really difficult challenges that families with food allergy deal with on an everyday basis. And I will say I've been very happy that our food allergy field now, I think, has really come back to that. So not that they're not focusing on the immune changes and the science, but I think they're realizing that that burden of living with a food allergy is tremendous, and we need to do more to figure out sort of ways that we understand it, that we can measure it, and then the treatments that we come up with not only help protect against anaphylaxis, but also sort of address this burden piece. And so, yeah, I have learned tremendously from my patients. For the longest time, it was the other way around, where I was the one coaching them. But once our kids were diagnosed, all of a sudden it's like, oh, how did so-and-so deal with, setting things up at their school, or, what do they do about summer camps or birthday parties? And, a lot of these things that kind of come as a given for families not dealing with allergy. Again, suddenly it becomes something you actually have to think about.
So with Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and New Year's, how do you deal with food allergies in children when most every holiday seems to include a lot of eating?
Yeah, I mean, again, this starting with Halloween all the way through the holidays, as you say, I mean, food is just central to sort of our lives and our social events. So it can be very, very difficult. And just thinking about examples from my own family. Again, some folks understand it. Some folks you can work with, and other folks, it may be a little bit more difficult. So I think it is going to be somewhat of a case-by-case basis, depending on sort of what's happening in that family dynamic. Really, my biggest advice is planning, just being prepared for it. I think the hardest thing in the world is to go into something like that and then suddenly realize, oh my goodness, there's nothing to eat that I feel confident will be safe for my child. And so I think the more you can plan ahead, and so what that could mean would be, maybe talking with the host. If you're going to someone else's house, just let them know ahead of time. It doesn't have to be necessarily a big deal, but just let them know, look, my son has a peanut allergy. Just want to let you know. And, if there's certain things that you think have peanut, if you can let us know, some of that. Planning ahead as far as, possibly bringing some of your own stuff. So there are occasions, especially if it's foods that are kind of more difficult to avoid. So milk and egg come to mind. So if you think about any of your classic holiday meals, there's a high chance that there's going to be dairy involved, a high chance there's going to be some sort of egg products involved. And in those situations, that might be one of those where, whether it's meant to be a potluck or not, you may turn it into a potluck. And you bring a couple of things that that will be safe and be tolerated. But again, one of those things that you want to know ahead of time and have that pre-planned. And then depending on the age of your child, again, sometimes a conversation ahead of time can be helpful as well, just to kind of let them know, again, look, there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of different types of food. Just a reminder that you are allergic, and if there are certain things that you're not sure of, come and ask me first, and we can figure out whether it's safe for you or not. And I think just some of those reminders are going to be important. I will say one thing I'll add here is that we do know that when it comes to sort of those more severe, possibly life-threatening reactions to foods, they really only happen when you eat the food. And so, kind of being in the same room as some, as some food that was prepared that perhaps has peanut in it or tree nut or something like that would not be expected to cause any types of problems at all. Definitely not the severe or the life-threatening. So I think at least knowing that aspect can be helpful. So really, it's all about just controlling what goes in your mouth. So being aware, And when in doubt, in those situations, probably avoiding.
So if your child does have an allergic reaction to a particular food, should you always head to the emergency department? How does a layperson tell the difference between a child with a serious reaction and one who's just eaten too many cookies?
Oh yeah. This is also a question that actually, also I'm glad you're bringing it up because it's not quite the same answer as it has been in the past. So really, I think what we historically had told people was, look, you're home, your kid has an allergy. There's no sort of medical professionals in your house. So when in doubt, you're probably going to be thinking about your epinephrine injector, your EpiPen, and then calling 911 and heading to the emergency room to just make sure that nothing worse is going to happen. And so that's kind of been our practice for, many, many, many years. But fast forward to 2020 and then COVID hits. And suddenly you're like, wait, first of all, every time I go to the emergency room, I sit there for 4 hours and nothing happens. So why do I need to go? And then on top of that, wait, I don't want to go to the emergency room and get COVID. And so a lot of people started to come back and just say, wait, is this the right advice? And so I think the field is kind of rethinking this and maybe possibly changing up some of the guidelines. And really the thought there is going to be epinephrine is your best friend. So we know I shared with the experience with both of my two kids. They had anaphylaxis. Epinephrine knocked out their symptoms within 5-10 minutes, and they were fine. One of them went to the emergency room. The other one did not. Neither of them had any additional symptoms afterward. So, we may be coming to a place where, look, if you have a family that, is pretty savvy, they have their medicine on hand, and they use the epinephrine and the child improves instantly and there's no other recurrence of symptoms, they may not necessarily have to go to the emergency room. Definitely one of those things that should be discussed with the allergist, though, not something that we want families sort of deciding on their own. Because again, certain situations may say that it's not a safe thing. The example that comes to mind is we know kids who have asthma maybe have more risk to have a bigger reaction. And so if you've got one of those kids, you may not want to sort of roll the dice on that one. So that might be the kid where it's good to be in a safe place. But if you have someone who, again, maybe is otherwise much more stable, they have an extra EpiPen in the house, maybe they're like, I don't know, 10, 15-minute drive to the emergency room. There may be certain situations where it can be properly managed in the house as well.
Right. Well, thank you so much. Well, we're out of time for today, but thank you so much, Dr. Kim. That's all we've got time for today. Our thanks to our subject matter expert, Dr. Edwin Kim. Thank you, and thank our audience for joining our podcast from UNC Children's. We hope you'll subscribe and join us for future shows. For more information on UNC Children's Hospital, go to unchildrens.org. Thank you.